Good evening. Welcome to Chelmsford's newest public affairs show, Chasing the Facts. And tonight's guest is Lisa Marrone, Chelmsford's Economic Development Director.
Thank you.
How are you, Lisa?
Thank you for having me on. I'm doing great.
We're very pleased to have you on the show. And perhaps we could start off by having you explain, first of all, what is an Economic Development Director? I think a lot of people probably don't know.
Okay, so I've been asked that a few times, and each community kind of manages economic development a little bit differently, but in a very broad general term. I like to look at it as anything that affects the businesses in town and the residences, the experience of being in Chelmsford, what that means. So it's the workforce, it's the businesses, it's the stability of the microeconomy. The small businesses are just as important as the largest employers as well. So it's a lot of tools in my toolbox with either hand-holding with small businesses or government programs offering for larger businesses. It's connecting with the Career Center, it's connecting with state agencies. I'm kind of a liaison between the state, the local community, sometimes federal funds. It's a little bit of everything. So it's different from town to town, and it's driven by what the needs are and where my help is mostly mostly needed. So that's a real general description of it. Typically focused on job creation, job retention. And in Chelmsford, my role here as a very primary focus is to fill up empty space, fill up empty business space. As you know, we've got some to offer, yes. So that was part of the purpose of bringing me on board.
And I did certainly have read your resume, and we've worked together a little bit on the Economic Development Commissions. But I think folks would be interested to know a little bit about your background and what brings you to this particular job function. And if you could just touch upon some of your business-related experience, because I think that all is very important and goes into making up what a good economic development director's background should be.
So. Right. So thank you. Thanks for taking the time to read my credentials. And it's kind of a long, slow crawl. If you noticed, it's been a long, slow crawl. So started one of my first full-time jobs was in manufacturing, and they paid for me to go to school at night. They had tuition assistance, and so I started a college pursuit at night. I was 25 when I started college, so I was a little bit late to the game, but caught up and ended up getting an associate's degree in 1996 from Mount Wachusett Community College. That helped me get a job at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and I worked there in their operations support system, and kind of promoted my way up through. And I continued to night school, where Lincoln Lab paid for my night school as well, and I kept going and graduated Bentley University in 2000 and worked my way into a business manager position in one of the air missile defense departments, which was really exciting work. Doing a lot of budgeting, budget analysis type of management for millions and millions of dollars in that one segment. You have a top secret clearance. It's pretty rewarding to do. But what happened was the commute kind of got in the way of raising my children. And so I ended up transitioning after about a dozen years at Lincoln Lab, working for my hometown, which was the city of Leominster, and I began economic development there. My degree from Bentley is a project management degree, so it works well in the world of business and in the world of small projects or different types of infrastructure or construction. And when I started in Leominster, I was part of the pursuit for MORE grant. If you had heard what that is, it's the Massachusetts opportunity to relocate and expand business. So I worked on that for a number of years, and I started Leominster in '06, which was a time when the economy was falling apart.
Yes, it was.
And it was a real tough introduction into the world of economics. So
And Leominster's a tough city.
yes, exactly. It's a gateway community.
I lived in Fitchburg for a number of years
So
and
you
spent
know.
time in Leominster and knew an awful lot of people and even knew some of the local politicians. And tough.
Tough, hardworking,
Yes.
lot of blue collar, a lot of grit type of, but good-hearted people and just a seasoned workforce out there. And that's kind of what I grew up around. My grandparents, my mother, my father was an aircraft mechanic in the Air Force, so I've been around a mix of industries. So worked for the city of Leominster and knew it so well and just really enjoyed doing that work. But Leominster managed that job through a grant, community development block grant for gateway communities. And every year it was, I had to reapply to...
You're on pins and needles.
Every year.
Knowing whether or not you'll get a job,
right.
To be able to continue
Pretty
in your
much,
job.
yeah. And they kept
tough.
cutting the grant several times. And I reached a point where I just didn't want to continue in that manner and had tried some other options of trying to adjust some of that structure internally, and that wasn't an option. So I decided to go back to school. So I went back, got my master's degree in 2016, and had a bit of a progressive plan for myself. So once I achieved that, graduated with an MBA, and I finished online learning, a 3.9 GPA. It was a great experience for online education. I strongly encourage everyone to do that continual lifelong learning process, and started a job search. And my first outreach was through some of the state agencies I had been working with over the years, and then they started looping me in and they said, you want to take a closer look at Chelmsford. They just, a newly created position based on some needs here, and they kind of pointed me in this direction. Mass Office of Business Development, they are the agency that you work with when you're offering tax incentives.
Yes.
And I had put in about 8 or 9 tax incentive agreements with industries while I was in Leominster. And so just those conversations and the value of what you bring to the team, your experience, and they said, well, maybe you want to kind of look closer at what Chelmsford doing. So that's how it began. And there's a lot of similarities. Chelmsford's a town, Leominster's a city, but they both have that. There's some manufacturing, there's some high tech, there's some transportation access with the highways, and the workforce is very dedicated and strong. And so some of it was very familiar to me in Chelmsford. Some of what I wasn't really accustomed to is a community that wasn't a gateway city. So, so the gateway is a level of poverty, a lower attainment of education, higher population. So there's more resources available to help. There's transformative development grants, there's placemaking, there's all types of other types of money that you can use. That's not
well,
available
plus,
here.
I mean, Leominster, you're right, it's a different demographic, it's a different character. I like your term gritty, I guess. But the commercial and industrial base is a little different than it is in Chelmsford because it leans more towards the, I would call it light industrial in Leominster, so the needs are a little different. But I think it's important, and I'm glad you gave your bio there, because I think it's important for people to understand that people like you who come into town, a town like Chelmsford, which quite frankly a lot of the employees in the town have been people that grew up in the town, so whenever an outsider comes in, there's always a little bit of a kerfuffle and, why didn't we hire somebody local and blah, blah, blah. But this is a very specific job with targeted needs, And one of my complaints has always been, whenever we hire somebody, that the person only has public sector experience. Now, obviously, that is critical to this situation, But really, what I like to see is somebody like you who has that well-rounded background. You've had a lot of private sector experience, and of course that's directly applicable to what you're trying to do anyway.
Right,
so
right.
I think it's been a good fit. And not to belabor the point, and you may know this already, but I will say it, before you were hired, there was quite a bit of discussion and, quite frankly, controversy and disagreement as to whether the town even needed this position filled. So that makes it even more critical that we have somebody with your background and experience level and not some neophyte that came in here. So I think it's, from my observation, for the year you've been here, it's been a good fit. And people have been very pleased with what you've been able to do thus far. So let's follow up a little bit on that. And after a year in the position, what would you say continues to be the most pressing need for the town? Short term and then maybe long term, if you could expand on that a little.
Well, some of the short term that takes time. You know, I am outreach on behalf of Chelmsford. I'm proactively out in the community.
You mean a month after you're here, you haven't filled 1 million square feet of space? Well, I don't know. You better get cracking.
I left my cape in my office.
That's
Sorry
right.
about that.
Yeah.
We have brought in some businesses. There's a lot more work to go to do, but I think building relationships, building an image that Chelmsford is welcoming, and some of that starts with the zoning changes that happened, and it takes time because developers are their attention is in other areas for 2 years on a project, and by the time they can start looking around for the next opportunity. So I think now, you know, last year was spent a lot of personable conversations, a lot of meet and greets, a lot of networking. And that's important because it brings value to the reason why you want to contact and connect with Chelmsford, other than someone just calling and say, what permits do I need for my space? What I'm doing is making sure that the businesses here are happy to be here, and if they have any issues, to contact me, because I'd like to be part of their problem-solving process.
Very important.
Very important.
And
we
I'm
don't
sure
want to
when you
lose
did your
any more.
initial outreach, some of them were even shocked to hear from you.
They were. They didn't understand.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Why are you calling?
They didn't understand my role.
Yeah.
They said, "Wow, you're here to help me."
Yeah.
You
Wow.
know, that's what I say. You know, I'm here to help.
You're a government employee and you're here to
help.
Oh, something's wrong.
So it takes time. You know, it takes time to create that introduction. And for example, Zoll Medical. You know, it took me 3 or 4 attempts to get their attention through a variety of ways. You know, showing up, door knocking, or sending a letter, making a phone call. I ended up working with another partner through Mass Life Science to get my way to get full attention of Zoll Medical. And once we did, now we're sitting down, we're talking about workforce training funds, we're talking about tax incentives, we're talking about retention, we're talking about the importance of that very large medical-based company to stay here in Chelmsford. So when we learned that they were looking around, then, you know, we pull out all the stops and we kind of went down and had an important meeting and learned what their intentions were, and you know, they were looking around. And that's very significant space that they consume there that we don't want any more happening.
Right.
So,
and Zoll is a great story, you know. So you really need to you need to tell that.
Yes,
and
right.
You know, give yourself some credit for that.
So
as well.
yeah, and I don't want to say I was the only one, but I think there's value to an outreach from the town for them just to hear, you know, you're a valued, very important part of what happens here in Chelmsford, not just by taking up empty space and bringing in workers and things like that, but it's the perception of Chelmsford, it's the image of Chelmsford, it's that vibrant economy that's happening, and then people that are here, they want to live closer, they want to patron here, they want to spend their money here, and on goes the trickle-down economics. And as so would have it, they purchased their buildings, $35 million, and they also plan to hire another 150 people.
Great story. Right.
So, you know, that's what we need, and we need to highlight that more. We need to, you know, advertise this and make sure that it brings an awareness of what Chelmsford has. Does anybody know that we have international headquarters here for some very advanced companies? I was in a couple companies last week that is just, you know, I'm just awestruck. And that was happening in my last role. You don't know what's going on behind the cinder block walls when you're moving around Chelmsford here. But when we met with that company, it was First Light Diagnostics. And they're building testing equipment that drastically reduces the time for test results of very dangerous diseases, infectious diseases, things that are very life-threatening. So instead of waiting 3 or 4 days, literally, for the results of lab work and blood work to come back, it's 4 hours. It's 3 or 4 hours. And they're building that machinery here in Chelmsford at a research and development facility here. And they just quietly came in without saying anything to anyone. So what I'm trying to do is just be a part of that welcome package, not the person that issues permits or does the inspections for their machinery or, you know, things like that. I want to be the person that says, if there's anything you need from the town of Chelmsford, I'd like to be your first phone call,
and we're
whatever it could be.
And we're glad you're here.
Right.
Whatever we can do to help you
And then
reasonably.
continue that follow-up
Right.
and say, here's a new program that was just announced. Or have you considered the Chelmsford Business Association? Things that they wouldn't even think to check into.
Wouldn't know about. And,
You know?
and this is something that, you know, years ago when I was on the Board of Selectmen, I felt very strongly that we needed to do, I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't thinking in terms of your position, but I knew that the town needed to do some kind of outreach. And I noticed that the city of Lowell at that time had an economic development director position, and thought, gee, maybe that's something that we should look into, and then didn't think too much more about it. But that whole concept was really brought forward by Selectman Glenn Diggs, and also ably assisted by Ken Lefebvre on the Board of Selectmen. I would say those two drove that whole concept very hard. And then, of course, we had the Economic Development Commission. So, and you were talking a minute ago about you know, making people aware of the town and what it has to offer, the branding and so forth. So could you talk a little bit about the Economic Development Commission's role in bringing that about, and do you feel supported by the EDC in that particular area?
Very much so. So when I arrived last January, the commission was in the final steps of formulating the logo and the branding campaign for 129. And so what that will do is kind of set that image and that impression of what is this 129. All types of communities have empty space. We all have empty office buildings, and you know, everybody's grabbing. Of course, we want more businesses to come in, but what's going to make Chelmsford a little bit different than all the rest, and how does that work? And it's the complete package of that offering. So what the EDC has been very excellently orchestrating is the whole package. It's the website that's about to be finished. It's the drone video. If you've had a chance to preview it, it's extraordinary. It's like a 3-minute commercial that just promotes what Chelmsford industry is all about, and the Chelmsford business space, and why you want to locate here. We're talking about you know, possibly a trade show booth. There's no reason why Chelmsford can't have a trade show booth. It doesn't have to mean that we're promoting engineering services, but we're promoting our community as a business-friendly community with available empty space, excellent flexible zoning, expedited permitting. We've got a team of people waiting. Developers and investors don't want to go where they're not welcome, or where it's going to be a hard, heavy push to get in and get started. You know, so I think the more promotion and awareness we do, as far as, you know, you don't hear about marketing marketing a community, but what we're doing is the crossroads at Route 129 is its own economic engine per se, and I think the EDC has done an excellent job at very thoughtfully preparing that the whole approach to it. So very soon, in the next hopefully 30 days, some of that will be finalized, and we'll be putting out some materials about it. And that will, so of all the things I've been trying to accomplish, now I actually have some tools.
Right.
You know, I've been doing a lot of meet and greets, lots of conversations, lots of, you know, pointing at a map, but now there'll be takeaways, there'll be things that they can reference, go to the website, look at all of the supports and available resources, the programs, connect with some of the brokers that are advertising space. You know, let us know what your questions are, or let's sit down and talk about some ideas. When I have a meet and greet, at my table is the chairman for the EDC. Donald Van Dyne. I invite the Community Development Director, Evan Belansky. I invite Mr. Lefebvre, he's the liaison. Right, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen. I often can include the building commissioner because he's the guy that the developers want to partner nice with. And if they hear from him, oh, that's not going to be a problem. Oh, I can, and I'll inspect that the same day you call me. You know, they love to hear. They love to see that at the table. Where typically, you know, municipalities don't usually do that type of approach. It's, you know, you don't want anybody getting in on your potential clients, so everybody starts closing it in tight, and you're not having those discussions that helps with the decision making and commitment when you roll out that red carpet. They're certainly looking at other communities, but they say, well, you know what, Chelmsford really has it, you know, has their act together, very organized. Everybody's at the table all at once, all your questions and information answered, and then you're exchanging all your contact info. They can reach out to any of us at any time. It's that teamwork and that team effort, and I think that's where the EDC comes in as a foundation to that.
Right.
And they've been coming on my site visits. They've been very supportive in the work I'm trying to do, so I feel like I've been really welcomed in.
And well supported, I think.
Yeah.
And for those in the audience who don't know, the Economic Development Commission is a group of Chelmsford residents, and with varying degrees of experience in terms of marketing and selling the town, in terms of trying to get business into the town. We have members on there that have financial expertise and government expertise and so forth. And it's a typical Chelmsford committee. These are all volunteers.
Right, right. So if I have any questions, or if
volunteers.
I have any needs or any concerns, you know, that's another great resource for me to try to provide the exceptional customer service, if you will, as my role of, you know, I'm here to help these businesses. So
exactly, and you know, the old saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Right.
And people I know, and I've had some experience myself in this area, you go to other towns and you try to get something started, a small business, and not only is the air unwelcoming, it can be downright hostile. And I won't mention the names of some of the towns where I've had that experience, but they're not too far from Chelmsford, some of them.
Right, some they don't return phone calls, they don't even look up when you stop in.
So the very fact that you talk to people and that you have a welcoming attitude, I think is may not be half the battle, but at least it's the start. And that's something that I noticed about you right away, was that you, even though you weren't totally familiar with the town, you hit the ground running. And we have EDC meetings basically once a month, and Lisa is a part of that process and gives a full-blown monthly report, I would call it, in terms of what you've been doing that month and the actions that you've taken and the people that you've talked to and met and so forth. So that's all good stuff. Now, in terms of trying to sell the community, which is what you're trying to do,
Yes, yes.
what is the biggest problem Chelmsford has relative to some of the other communities that are more fully commercially developed than we are?
So that's a multi-layer answer. So I think, again...
and I'll give you more than 30 seconds.
Okay. So the challenge is I'm finding that developers are putting so much time into the Boston suburbs. It's hard to get any of their attention for the realtors and developers and the stakeholders. It seems like Chelmsford empty space is in the bottom portfolio of their asset management of their properties. So when we finally starting to get them to come to the table and have some direct conversations, what are we going to do about this space? It's been empty for 5 years, you know. So it's one of those things where, you know, not to invest money and then wait for tenants, or wait for tenants that don't make, you know, it's not looking exciting and all of that. So it's that chicken and egg situation. But I think the more we keep pushing, so now they've been responding and they're coming forward and saying,
Great.
you know, we've been thinking about it.
Great.
Here's a rendering of what we've been trying to talk about. And it's very exciting. We're finally getting those conversations that are getting past, you know, past those initial meet and greets, and we're having some more serious conversations that are leading to some project discussions. So I think 2019 is going to be full of some pretty exciting.
I hope so.
I'm very encouraged. You know, it's starting to connect, and I think that we're going to have a lot of good things happening. And in the long term, it's more about bringing more partnerships in, bringing in mass development, look at this space, so that when large companies are coming into Chelmsford or coming in at the state level, they're getting directed towards Chelmsford. You know, similar, you know, everybody says Devons, we're all competing with Devons.
Right.
Well, some of that, I don't, you know, possibly true, but when you have partnerships at the higher levels, they're giving those options, you know, Mass Econ, you know, I'm a member on the board there. So it's those hard, continual, you know, just don't be discouraged, keep going, and keep bringing in more tools and resources as you go along. So you just don't know how it's going to connect or where it's going to connect, but it will eventually.
Oh, that's great. And the counterpoint to that, what's the big benefit to coming to Chelmsford? And we've got about 2 minutes. For you to answer that question.
Oh, geez, how do I know? Well, first, I mean, before we run out of time,
Oh, wow.
right? I brought this plate for you.
Oh, thank
it's
you.
A little gift for the
That's-
host.
that's
This was
great.
made in Chelmsford, WNA, Waddington, North America. They employ over 700 people here. And they take up an awful lot of space, and they're an important employer. But I think, you know, in general, businesses want to locate here for a variety of reasons. The workforce is number one, transportation number two. We have last mile shuttles available for businesses that want to engage in that. We have UMass Lowell. We have a continual pipeline of very well trained, very skilled workers coming out. We've got great empty space in a town that's willing to do whatever we need to do, you know, within laws and regulations to help businesses come in and consider Chelmsford. You can see it from Route 3. You know, you're right there in these major interchanges, and we're bringing in new construction of market rate housing units, you know, rental units for workers to come in. We're trying to remove all the obstacles, and we're trying to put out as much, you know, all the reasons why you can be very successful in Chelmsford.
Well, I think that's a very good summary of why people should come to Chelmsford. You know,
Right.
We're trying to be a welcoming community.
Yes.
The mindset over the years, really over the last 10 years, has completely changed. 10 years ago, the mindset in town is we don't want any development, but I think people now realize that is tied to what they have to pay in property taxes.
Right.
And we have a more
Right.
robust commercial sector, then that's going to help on the residential tax side. So anyway, Lisa, we're very, very glad that you're with us.
Thank you so much.
I think
it's great to be here.
You're a wonderful employee.
Thank you.
And I think you've brought an awful lot of spirit to this whole concept of business development.
I love what I do.
In town, and it's completely obvious to me. So thank you very much for being on the show, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Likewise.